The door that should never have opened. The sound was unlike anything else on Rikers Island. A deep, metallic slam followed by silence. Then, a scream. It came from the part of the jail no camera was ever supposed to see. A section guard whispered about but never admitted existed. The Supermax wing, built deep inside Rikers, for the inmates who had gone too far even for Rikers standards. Inside those walls, light barely touched the floor. No windows. No clocks. No sound, except for the slow drip of a leaking pipe and the hum of a single buzzing light bulb that never turned off. And on one night in 2019, that silence broke when an inmate named Marcus Red Taylor, a gang member serving time for armed robbery, was dragged out of his isolation cell screaming that someone had been disappearing in the block. Guards thought it was another psychotic episode, until they opened the wrong door. And what they saw that night, most of them never spoke about again. But what exactly was hidden inside Rikers Island Supermax wing? And why were their stories the public was never meant to hear? The secret within the island. From the air, Rikers Island looks like nothing more than concrete and fences floating in the East River, a gray bruise on New York City skin. But once you cross the bridge, the noise of traffic fades and the air changes. It feels heavy, like the island itself is holding its breath. Everyone who's been there says the same thing. Time slows inside Rikers. When Marcus Taylor, known on the streets as Red, arrived in 2018, he thought he knew jail. He'd done short stint before, mostly fights and small-time hustles. This time the judge called him a danger to the general population, and those words followed him like a curse on the ride over the bridge. The guard who chained him to the seat whispered, "You're going down, Taylor," and Red didn't realize how literal that was. Instead of the usual intake block, they marched him through a corridor that sloped beneath the main complex. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. At the end stood a steel door with no handle, only a keypad and a warning sign. Authorized personnel only. A hiss, a flash of light, and Red stepped into what the officers call the Enhanced Security Housing Unit. The inmates had another name for it, the tomb. His cell was the size of a walk-in closet. No window. A single buzzing light that never shut off. Meals arrived through the slot in silence. Guards wore black gloves and mirrored glasses so he couldn't see their eyes. The only sound was the hum of the ventilation and, sometimes, a faint click, like a recorder switching on. Days blurred. Red tried to scratch marks on the wall to count them, but each morning the lines were gone, scrubbed clean while he slept. On the fifth night, he heard it. 3 taps on the wall. Pause. 2 taps. He answered the pattern. A whisper came through the vent. "Don't talk back. They're listening." He lay awake until morning, wondering who they were. A week later, a young officer delivered breakfast. The badge said Delgado. He spoke quietly, almost kindly. "You holding up, Taylor?" Red asked, "What is this place?" Delgado looked around, lowered his voice. "You're not supposed to be here." When Red pressed for details, the guard muttered, "Ask 23, and hurried off. There were only 12 doors in the corridor that he could see, numbered B1 through B12. Still, that night, when the lights flickered, he heard an extra door slam, heavy, metallic, somewhere beyond the corner. The next morning, he found a napkin folded beneath his tray. On it, in shaky pencil, were the words ASK 23. He hid the note, but curiosity gnawed at him. During his hour of recreation, he scanned the walls and spotted a vent grate slightly bent at the edge. Through it he glimpsed a narrow hallway below and, at the far end, a yellow-painted door marked 23. The sight made his pulse quicken. It was real. That night he asked Delgado again, "What's behind 23? The young guard went pale. "Forget that number." Next morning, Delgado was gone. The officer who replaced him said flatly, "There's no Delgado." The phrase hit Red like a brick. Men didn't just vanish from Rikers. Paperwork always followed. But hey, things happened that no paper ever recorded. As the days dragged on, the fluorescent light began to feel like a second sun. Red started hearing noises through the floor, distant wheels, faint voices, then silence. Each time the lights flickered 3 times, another inmate stopped answering when he called out. Transfers, the guards claimed. Yet transfers didn't happen at 3 a.m. One evening a folded napkin appeared again under his tray. "Stop asking." He crumpled it, heart racing. That night the hum inside the walls deepened until it sounded almost like breathing. Then a voice spoke through the intercom, calm, mechanical. Subject 6 is active again. Static followed. He whispered into the vent, "Who's Subject 6? The reply came like a breath in his ear. "You are." He pressed against the wall, panic rising. When the lights came back on, the message was gone. His marks, his notes, everything wiped clean. Only one new thing remained, a plastic tag on the floor stamped property of internal unit. "Do not remove." He hid it under his mattress. That afternoon 2 men in black uniforms with no name tags opened his door. Their patches read internal unit. "Hands out," one said. They cuffed him, pulled a hood over his head, and marched him through a maze of corridors. The air grew colder. The floor changed from tile to metal grating. Beneath his feet he could hear dripping water. When the hood came off, he was in a room lit by a single bulb. A chair was bolted to the floor. A small recorder sat on a table. "State your name," a man ordered. "Marcus Taylor, also known as Red." He nodded. "Do you know why you're here?" "No." "Because you ask questions," the man said. "Curiosity doesn't survive down here." He clicked off the recorder and leaned closer. "You saw the door." Red swallowed. "What's behind it?" "Nothing now," the man said, and motioned for the guard to take him away. Back in his cell, the air felt thinner. On the wall, written in fresh black marker, were 3 words: "Stop asking questions." He stared until they blurred into shadows. Somewhere in the distance a heavy door slammed, the same deep metallic sound he'd heard before, but louder, closer, final. The lights dimmed, then flickered out completely. In the darkness the hum of the island seemed to move through the floor, through his body, pulsing like a heartbeat. For a moment he thought he heard Delgado's voice whisper from the vent, "Don't let them open it." Then silence. Red sat motionless, realizing that on Rikers Island, punishment wasn't about guilt. It was about knowledge. Whatever he had seen, whatever door 23 hid, was something he was never meant to understand. And somewhere below, the tomb was still breathing. The whole way of echoes. When the light returned, it wasn't steady. It pulsed, faint and uneven, washing the concrete walls in pale yellow. Marcus Red Taylor blinked hard, trying to clear the fog in his eyes. The last thing he remembered was a voice whispering through the vent. Now his head throbbed and his throat felt dry, as if he'd been shouting in his sleep. His mattress was soaked, his papers gone. On the floor near the door lay the plastic tag he'd hidden. Only now, the letters were different. The words property of internal unit had been scratched out. Below it, in red ink, someone had written, "You're next." He stumbled backward, heart hammering. Someone had entered his cell again. Someone with keys, someone who wanted him to know they could come and go at will. He banged on the door, shouting for the guard, but only his echo answered. For a full hour there was no sound, no response, only the hum of the fluorescent bulb. Then, from the vent above his head, came a faint metallic click and a voice clearer than before. "Red!" He froze. "Who is this?" "It's me. Stax." The name hit him like an electric shock. Tyrone Stax Coleman, the inmate who'd vanished days earlier. "Where are you?" Red whispered. "Below," the voice said. "Listen to me. You were right. The door leads down." "Down where?" "They call it Section 9. It's not on any map. They take people there when the paperwork doesn't match. I'm in a cell like yours, but smaller." Red pressed his ear against the vent. "How are you talking to me?" "Through the maintenance pipes. The lines cross near your block. Don't say my name out loud. If they hear me." The voice cut off mid-sentence, replaced by static. The vent clicked again. Silent. He backed away, shaking. Stax was alive, or something pretending to be him was. Hours passed. Then the lights flickered 3 times. Red felt the vibration through the floor. Footsteps, muffled voices, the same routine that always ended with a door slamming somewhere below. But this time, it didn't stop. The vibration moved upward, closer. He crouched, peering through the food slot. At the far end of the corridor, a shadow moved, tall, slow, dragging something heavy across the floor. For a second he saw the faint reflection of a face, half covered by a mask. Then the shadow vanished. When morning came, he was still sitting by the door. The breakfast tray slid through without a word. On the bread was a single fingerprint pressed into the crust, red like dried paint. Or blood. He didn't eat. Later that day, a voice crackled through the intercom. Inmate B6, prepare for medical. The door opened. 2 officers in black escorted him through a hallway he'd never seen before. The air smelled of ammonia and copper. They stopped in front of a small room with a metal table and bright light. A woman in a surgical mask stood beside it, holding a syringe. Just a blood test, she said, voice trembling slightly. What for? Red asked. Routine check. She leaned closer and whispered fast, barely moving her lips. They know you talked. Don't fight. Pretend it doesn't hurt. The needle pricked his arm. She slipped a folded label into his hand as she turned away. He hid it in his sleeve until they marched him back to his cell. When the door shut, he unrolled it under the flickering light. The label read, Unit 23, terminated. The word terminated hit him like a punch. He stared at it until the letters seemed to move. Was that what had happened to Stacks? To Delgado? To all the others who vanished after the lights flickered? He didn't sleep that night. The island felt alive, breathing around him, each vent a mouth whispering secrets. He started hearing faint echoes of his own voice repeating words he hadn't said yet. Sometimes laughter, sometimes a cry. The next morning, something new awaited him. On the floor under the food slot sat a cassette tape wrapped in clear plastic. No label. He tore the wrapping and held it to his ear. A faint buzz came from inside, recorded static. He slid it under his mattress. That night, when the lights dimmed, he used a broken wire from the lamp to rid connection between the tape and the intercom speaker. Static filled the room, then voices, distorted, layered like overlapping conversations. Transfer complete. Subject 6 unstable. Erase all prior entries. He heard his own name next. Taylor Marcus. Reassigned containment. Then a click. Authorization 23B. He yanked the wire out, shaking. They weren't just watching him. They were rewriting him, changing his record, his existence, piece by piece. In the middle of the night, another whisper came through the vent. Red! He recognized a voice this time. It wasn't Stacks. It was Delgado. They made me one of them. The voice said, Don't trust anyone in black jackets. They're not guards. They are part of the project. What project? Red hissed, but the voice faded into the hum. When he woke the next morning, his food tray contained only a cup of water and a folded slip of paper. On it, in typewriter font, was one line, You were never here. He laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the cell. Maybe that was true. Maybe. Somewhere in the system, Marcus Taylor had already been deleted. Hours later, alarms blared, sharp and sudden. Red pressed his ear to the door and heard chaos beyond it. Boots pounding, men shouting, the deep rumble of something metallic being dragged. Then a voice over the intercom, calm and cold. Containment breach. Section 9 compromised. The sound of running water followed, heavy, rushing. Steam filled the vent, hot and metallic, smelling of iron. Through the haze, he heard a voice calling his name from below. Red! Run! He shouted back, but the sound of sirens swallowed his words. The lights turned red. The door of his cell clicked once, then twice. It opened a few inches on its own. For the first time since he'd arrived, the lock had failed. He hesitated. If it was a trap, he'd die. If it wasn't, he might finally learn the truth. He pushed the door open. The hallway outside was filled with smoke. He ran barefoot toward the end, coughing, eyes burning. The yellow door, 23, was half open now, light spilling from the crack. Inside he could see shadows moving. He stepped closer, every instinct screaming to stop. Through the smoke he saw a figure sitting in the chair, head slumped forward, hands strapped to the arms. The skin was pale, the face hidden beneath a hood. He reached out to lift it. The face underneath was his own. He stumbled backward, gasping. The figure's lips moved, whispering the same words etched into his wall. Stop asking questions. The lights went out again. The last thing he heard was a door slamming shut behind him, and a voice on the intercom saying, "Phase 2 complete." The disappearance files. When the lights came back on, Red was lying on the floor of his cell. His throat burned, his wrists ached, and the air was thick with the smell of smoke and cleaning chemicals. Someone had wiped everything clean again. The mattress, the tag, even the tape he'd hidden. Gone. The wall that had once carried a warning now stood blank. Sterile, like nothing had ever happened. But something had happened. He could still feel the heat from the fire in the hall, still hear the whisper that had come from the body wearing his face. It hadn't been a dream. It was proof that whatever Phase 2 meant, it had already started. That morning, breakfast didn't arrive. No footsteps, no sound. Hours passed before a voice came through the intercom, soft, almost gentle. "Good morning, Marcus. How are we feeling today?" He froze. It wasn't the guard's voice. It was calm, practiced, like someone reading a script. "Who is this?" he asked. The voice continued. "We've been reviewing your file. There's an inconsistency. Would you like to help us fix it?" Red swallowed. "My file?" "Yes. It appears Marcus Taylor doesn't exist in the Rikers database anymore." The intercom crackled, and the voice added, "You can call me Dr. Collier. I manage the internal unit." "What do you want from me?" Red asked. "To correct an error," Collier replied. "Your file must be relined for your safety." A few minutes later, 2 guards in black entered his cell. They didn't cuff him this time. They simply gestured for him to follow. They led him through a corridor he hadn't seen before. New walls, freshly painted, the air humming with electricity. He noticed cameras mounted every 10 feet, their lenses following him as he walked. The corridor opened into a wide room filled with filing cabinets stacked to the ceiling. Dust coated every handle, yet the fluorescent light shone brightly above, revealing rows that stretched endlessly in every direction. A long table sat in the middle with a single chair. "Sit," one of the guards said. He obeyed. The moment he did, the overhead speaker came alive again. "These are the disappearance files," said Dr. Collier's voice. Every name in this room belonged to someone who vanished from Rikers records. Each one was corrected. "What do you mean, corrected?" Red asked. "They were reassigned. Their data now serves a greater purpose. You will join them soon, if you cooperate." He looked around. The nearest cabinet drawer was labeled B6 Taylor, Marcus. He pulled it open. Inside was a single folder, his mugshot, a printout of his old court records, and a small audio cassette. On the label, written in neat handwriting, Test Subject 23B. His stomach turned. "That's not me," he said. The speaker crackled. "Of course it is. Or at least, it was. But you've been reclassified now." He grabbed the folder and tore out the photograph. Behind it, taped to the back of the file, was a Polaroid. The image showed a narrow hallway lined with closed doors, each marked with numbers in yellow paint. One of them was open. Inside, strapped to the chair, was the same figure he'd seen before, the one that looked like him. The speaker buzzed again. "Return the file, Marcus." He whispered, "What happens to the ones who get reassigned?" They stopped asking questions. The lights flickered. The guard stepped forward, but Red shoved the chair back and ran down the aisle between cabinets. He darted left, right, the rows blending into a maze of metal and shadows. The overhead lights turned red. An alarm began to pulse. He found another door at the far end, marked Archive 23. The lock was open. Inside, he saw hundreds of stacked tape reels spinning slowly, red lights blinking in sequence. A faint hum filled the room, not mechanical, human. Dozens of overlapping voices whispered from the speakers, repeating names, birth dates, prison IDs. He stepped closer. The nearest tape was labeled Coleman, Tyrone, Stacks. The voice coming from it said the same line again and again. "I didn't see anything." He looked around. Every reel carried a different name he'd once heard whispered through the vents. Delgado, Stacks, dozens more, all looping endlessly, as if their memories had been recorded and replaced by obedience. He ripped Stacks tape from the reel. The machine screeched. Instantly, the alarm tone changed pitch, becoming a wail. He stumbled back, clutching the tape. The floor began to tremble as if the whole island had taken a breath. Then, through the static, one voice rose above the rest, his own, calm and hollow. Containment breach. Subject 6 has entered the archive. He turned toward the doorway. The two black-suited guards were there, silhouettes against the flashing red lights. "Return the tape," one said. He held it tighter. "What's on it?" "Your friend," the guard said. "He's safer here than out there." Red stepped back. The second guard reached for his radio, and that's when the sprinklers activated. Water burst from the ceiling, soaking the cabinets. The tapes hiss, the voices distorting into screams and static. Red bolted past them into the corridor. Alarms blared. Somewhere above, a recorded voice repeated, "Evacuate Section 9 immediately." He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to get out before they erased him too. He sprinted through a stairwell that spiraled upward. Every few steps he passed more yellow doors, each numbered, each sealed. Behind some of them he heard faint banging, voices crying for help. At the top of the stairs, a large security window looked out over a dark control room filled with monitors. On every screen was his face, some younger, some older, some strapped to chairs. Different versions of himself, each mouthing the same words, "Stop asking questions." He smashed the glass and climbed inside. The control panels buzzed, tape machines whirred, computer fans hummed. A single monitor in the corner glowed blue, displaying text. Phase 3 initialized. He slammed the keyboard. The image changed to a live feed of a hallway he recognized, his own cell block. Guards were dragging something past the cameras, something wrapped in a black bag. One of them turned toward the lens. It was him. The screen flickered and went black. Behind him, a calm voice spoke. "You shouldn't be here, Marcus." He spun around. Dr. Collier stood in the doorway, untouched by the chaos, his white coat spotless. "You've seen too much," Collier said softly. "What are you doing to these people?" "We're preserving them," Collier replied. "Their minds, their patterns, their obedience. You're proof that the process works." Red stepped back toward the broken window. "You can't keep doing this." Collier smiled faintly. "We already have. Rikers is only the beginning." Alarms blared louder. Smoke rolled through the vent above them. Collier turned toward the door, unfazed. "When the island resets, no one will remember this conversation," he said. "Not even you." Then the sprinklers burst again, water drenching the consoles. Collier vanished into the smoke. Red jumped through the window, hitting the floor hard, clutching the soaked cassette to his chest. He crawled through the steam toward the exit door. On the wall beside it, half-burned and peeling, was a sign that read, "Authorized access, internal unit only." He pushed the door open and stepped into a long corridor filled with flashing lights and echoing footsteps. Somewhere ahead, a siren howled and the ground shook beneath him. The Whistleblower. Red's bare feet slapped against the wet concrete as he ran. The cassette was still clutched in his hand, slick with sprinkler water and sweat. Sirens howled above him, echoing through the metal skeleton of Rikers Island like the island itself was crying out. He didn't know how long he'd been running. Time dissolved into flashing red lights and the taste of metal in his mouth. Every door he passed looked the same, gray, numbered, sealed, but the voices in the vents were changing. They no longer whispered warnings or names. Now they all repeated one phrase in perfect unison. "Phase 3 begins now." He turned a corner and skidded to a stop. Ahead, two regular uniformed officers, not internal unit, not faceless blackjackets, were blocking the corridor. They looked confused, tense, hands hovering near their radio mics. One of them, a woman with tired eyes and a badge that read him Reyes, spotted him first. "Hey!" she shouted. "Inmate, what are you doing out of your cell?" Red froze. These weren't the ghosts from the lower levels. These were everyday DOC staff, the kind that worked intake in regular blocks. The ones who didn't know what was happening downstairs. He held up his empty hands, tape still curled in one. "They opened my door," he said, breathing hard. "There's a fire down below. Something's wrong with Section 9, with the internal unit." The other officer, a tall man named Kravitz, stepped closer. "We don't have a Section 9. Red laughed bitterly. "Yeah, I was told the same thing about Delgado." Reyes studied his face. "You're B6, right? Marcus Taylor." His chest tightened. "You know my name?" "Of course," she said slowly. "You came in 2 months ago. ESHU placement. We did your intake." 2 months. His memories felt like weeks at most. Time really did bend on the island. Reyes glanced at the sprinklers still dripping overhead. "Look, whatever is going on with internal, that's above my pay grade. But if you're out of your cell, they'll come for you. And trust me, you don't want that." Red stepped closer, lowering his voice. "They're erasing people. They erased my file, Stack's file, Delgado's. They got rooms full of tapes with our voices on loop, like they turned us into recordings." He held up the cassette. "I took this from the archive. It's proof." Kravitz reached for it. "Give that here." Red pulled back fast. "No, I already watched them erase one guard for knowing too much. I'm not handing this to anyone in uniform unless I know they aren't with internal." Silence hung between them. Kravitz shifted nervously. Reyes kept her eyes locked on Red. There was something in her gaze he hadn't seen in any of the internal unit faces. Doubt. "Listen," she said finally, "I've seen things that don't make sense either. Transfers that don't show up in the system. Body logs that don't match population counts. Complaints from inmates who vanish before their hearings. Every time I ask, they tell me the same thing. Clerical error, move along." "So you know I'm not crazy," Red said. "I know something is wrong," she replied. "And I know if internal catches you with that tape, you'll never have been here either." Behind them, down the corridor, a door slammed. The echo chased them like a threat. Reyes made a decision. It showed in her shoulders before she even spoke. "Come with me," she said. "Now." Kravitz grabbed her arm. "Reyes, are you out of your mind? This guy's an inmate." "So were half the men who disappeared." She shot back. "You heard the alarms. Something's happening below. If internal's involved, do you really think they'll tell us the truth?" Kravitz hesitated. The siren screamed again, then cut off abruptly, leaving a heavier silence in their wake. The island sounded blank, like the hum had been turned down. He let go of her arm. "You've got 10 minutes, he muttered. "If anyone asks, I never saw him." Reyes nodded once. She motioned for Red to follow and led him through a side door marked staff only. For a second, the normal smell of Rikers, a mix of sweat, disinfectant, and frustration, gave way to something else. Printer ink and coffee. They entered a cramped office lined with file cabinets and a single computer terminal. On the wall, a corkboard held pinned papers, news clippings, and a faded memo from the Department of Correction about ongoing reform efforts. The kind of thing meant to make outsiders feel better. Reyes shut the door and locked it. "Sit," she said, pointing him to a chair opposite the computer. She took the cassette gingerly, like it might explode, and wiped it dry with her sleeve. "You said there were tapes with names and voices," she continued. "If this has anything on it, we're going to hear it ourselves." She rummaged in a drawer and pulled out an old tape adapter, the kind used for training recordings. She slid the cassette in, plugged it into the computer speaker, and pressed play. At first there was only static. Then, slowly, a voice emerged, crackling, watery, but unmistakable. "I didn't see anything," it said. A pause. Then again, the exact same words. "I didn't see anything." Red swallowed. "That stacks." Reyes listened, eyes narrowing. "Is this looped?" "Yes," Red said. "They tie people to chairs, record them until they break, then strip their file. The tapes stay down there. Their bodies." He didn't finish the sentence. Reyes paused the tape and pulled out her keycard. She sat at the computer and logged into the DOC system. The old monitor flickered to life. She typed something quickly. "Inmate search," she murmured. "Coleman, Tyrone. Nickname, Stacks. Assigned to kitchen, medium security." The screen blinked. Then a message appeared. "No record found." She tried again with a different ID number. Same result. And Delgado? Red asked. She entered the name. No record found. Reyes leaned back in her chair, jaw clenched. That's not possible. I've spoken to Delgado. He was on the staff list last month. She backed out of the inmate search and opened a hidden menu, quickly typing a string of codes. This is the internal audit log, she said. Every change to the system is tracked here, even when someone tries to delete it. Lines of data scrolled across the screen. She filtered for unit, ESHU and internal unit. For a moment, nothing showed. Then, a single line appeared at the bottom of the list. Entry, global override, internal unit. Action, record consolidation. Affected, 37 subjects. Status, success. AUTH, call 23. Reyes whispered, Collier. Red pointed at the screen. 37 people. Not people, Reyes said quietly. Subjects. She grabbed a notepad and scribbled the override code down, along with the authorization tag. I don't know how long this will stay visible, she said. If internal runs another sweep, this entry could vanish too. So what now? Red asked. We just sit here and listen while they wipe us. Reyes looked at him, and for the first time, her expression changed from doubt to resolve. No, we get this out. Out where? Off the island. She opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a small, cracked smartphone. We're not supposed to have personal phones on duty, she said. But Rikers isn't exactly perfect on policy, is it? She turned it on. The battery icon blinked low, but there was just enough power. She snapped a photo of the screen showing Collier's override. Then she recorded a short video of the cassette, Stack's looping voice, and Red sitting behind her in his inmate uniform. The night of fire. The maintenance tunnel was barely wider than Red's shoulders. Metal pipes ran along one side, sweating cold drops that landed on his neck as he crawled. The air was thick and dusty, tasting like old rust and burn plastic. Behind him, the sound of banging on Reyes' office door faded. Ahead, the hum of the island grew louder, changing from a background noise into something that felt almost alive. He moved slowly, pushing himself forward with his elbows, the ridges in the metal floor digging into his skin. The words he'd heard over the hidden speakers echoed in his head. Prepare for the night of fire. He didn't know what that meant, but on Rikers, announcements never meant anything good. After what felt like 10 minutes of crawling, he saw a faint rectangle of light ahead. A vent. He pressed his eye to the gap. Below was a service hallway, empty, lit by red emergency lights that flashed on and off. Every time they blinked, shadows jumped across the walls like ghosts trying to escape. He listened. No footsteps, no voices, just a low rumble of generators and distant alarms. Red kicked the vent loose and slid down carefully, landing in a crouch. The concrete was warm under his feet. That was wrong. Floors in the lower levels were always cold. Warm meant one thing. Something was burning, somewhere close. He turned left, moving toward a sign hanging crooked from the ceiling. Service elevator. Staff only. The metal doors were half open, stuck between floors. Inside, the elevator cage was empty, its emergency lights glowing dimly. He peered down the shaft. Smoke drifted up from the darkness below. Somewhere deep under the island, something big was burning. He stepped back, heart pounding. There was no going down that way. A crackle from the ceiling speaker made him jump. Internal lockdown in effect, the calm voice said. All staff report to Central Command. All inmates remain in assigned locations. Red laughed under his breath. Yeah, sure, he whispered. I'll get right on that. He followed the hallway until it curved sharply to the right. As he rounded the corner, he saw a door with a small glass window. Through it, he could see flickering orange light and moving shadows. The plaque beside the handle read, Archive access, authorized only. His chest tightened. Another archive. Another room full of erased lives. He pushed the door slowly. Heat rolled out like a wave. Inside, the walls were lined with shelves, but many were already blackened, their contents melting. A fire had started on one side of the room and was crawling along the shelves, eating paper and plastic, turning years of secrets into smoke. Red stepped inside, covering his mouth with his arm. The air was thick, hard to breathe. On a metal table in the center of the room, stacks of folders were arranged in neat piles, as if someone had been sorting them in a hurry and then walked away mid-task. He picked up the top file. The name printed on the tab stabbed at him. Reyes, Marisol, staff. His fingers tightened around the cardboard. He flipped it open. Inside were copies of her complaints about missing inmates, written warnings from supervisors, and a stamped note, refer to internal review. Tucked in the back was a blurry black-and-white photo of Reyes talking to someone at a coffee shop. A reporter. The same name she'd typed into the email address box on her phone. Red shut the file and looked at the other stacks. Delgado. Stacks. Names that had been turned into tapes and codes. Every folder here was about someone who had asked the wrong question or noticed the wrong thing. The flames were creeping closer. The nearest shelf crackled as a fire climbed up paper and plastic. He grabbed Reyes' file and one other at random, shoving them into the front of his jumpsuit. If he made it out, these would be his proof. If he didn't, maybe someone would find his body and pull them out. Maybe. A loud crash shook the room. A burning shelf collapsed, sending sparks flying. Red staggered back toward the door, coughing. Another alarm above the door began to scream, a new voice cutting through the noise. Night of Fire Protocol engaged, it said. All sensitive records will be purged. All data will be consolidated. All units prepare for reset. Reset, he muttered. That's all we are to them. Data to reset. He stumbled back into the hallway just as another shell fell, flames roaring behind him. The heat licked the back of his neck as he pulled the door shut. Through the glass, he saw folders curling, names disappearing into ash. He kept moving. The emergency lights flickered. To his left, a stairwell door stood open. A sign beside it said exit, no inmate access. He pushed through anyway. The stairwell felt like a chimney, hot air rising from below, cooler air drifting down from above. He grabbed the rail and started up, legs shaking. With each floor he passed, he saw door labels, medical, intake, visitation, admin, the real Rikers, the part the world was allowed to see. When he reached the landing marked admin, staff only, he heard shouting. He crept to the small wide glass window in the door. Through it he saw a control room full of officers and monitors. Screens flashed images of burning corridors, flickering blocks, and scrolling text. In the center of the room stood Dr. Collier, his white coat immaculate even now. He spoke calmly as alarms flashed behind him. This is contained, Collier was saying. The fire is restricted to archival sections. Once the purge is complete, we'll restore normal operations. The incident will be logged as an equipment malfunction. One of the senior officers, a woman with gray hair and deep lines on her face, shook her head. You can't bury this. Collier, we've got staff unaccounted for. Inmates missing. A lockdown spanning 6 sectors. Collier adjusted his glasses. We've contained larger problems. Rikers is chaos on a good day. No one will question the fire. We'll release a statement, schedule another reform tour, and the public will move on. Red's hands clenched into fists. Through the glass he scanned the room for Reyes. For a moment he thought he saw her, then realized it was just another officer with the same hair pulled back. Was she downstairs with internal? In a cell? In a file already burning? Collier continued. I want all remaining disappearance files routed to Section 9 for final consolidation. If any staff ask questions, remind them this is an internal unit drill. They signed confidentiality forms. A younger officer spoke up. And what about the inmate? Subject 6. Taylor. Collier's jaw tightened just a little. If he's still alive, he won't be for long. The fire will take care of that. If not, the reset will. Either way, by morning, there will be no Marcus Taylor in this building. Red stepped back from the window, heart pounding. By morning, there will be no Marcus Taylor in this building. That wasn't just a threat. It was a plan. He could run back down into the tunnels and disappear. Or he could do the one thing Collier didn't expect. Make noise. He scanned the stairwell wall. Near the bottom of the railing, half hidden under peeling paint, was a small metal box with a keyhole and a faded sticker. Fire Evac Pool Station. Central. Internal might have locked the systems, but basic safety controls were built long before Collier's project. and some parts of Rikers were too old to listen to new rules. Red grabbed the metal cover and yanked. It didn't budge. He kicked it once, twice. The silence after. The fire burned through the night. By morning, thick black smoke curled above the East River, turning the winter sky the color of ash. From across the water, commuters on the Queen's side stopped to stare. News choppers circled overhead. To the public, it looked like another prison riot, another tragedy on an island that had long stopped shocking anyone. But this time was different. This time, Rikers Island was finally visible. Inside, chaos gave way to silence. The fire alarms went dead one by one. Sprinklers sputtered until they coughed out steam. Charred papers drifted through flooded hallways like falling snow. Names, memos, fragments of lives. In the distance, a helicopter spotlight swept across the ruined roof, cutting through smoke and darkness. Somewhere beneath the rubble of Section 9, Marcus Red Taylor was still moving. He had crawled through the burning corridor, one hand gripping the wall, the other clutching the half-melted cassette. The air was poisoned now, filled with melting plastic and wet ash, but he kept going. The hum of the island had stopped, replaced by the faint crackle of fire and the distant thud of collapsing ceilings. Every few steps he passed open cells, doors hanging crooked, chains half-melted. In one he saw what looked like a shape sitting upright in a chair, motionless. He didn't stop to look closer. The voices that used to whisper through the vents were gone, replaced by the roar of the flames. When he reached the junction leading toward the service elevator, he heard something new, the sound of rushing water. Fire hoses, voices shouting above ground. Real ones this time, not recordings, not echoes. He pushed through the smoke until he found the elevator shaft again. The metal was hot, the walls dripping, but the ladder inside was intact. He climbed, step by step, each rung searing his palms. He pulled himself up through the dark. When he finally reached the top and forced the hatch open, he saw sunlight, weak and gray, filtered through a haze of smoke, but sunlight all the same. He dragged himself onto the main floor, coughing. Around him, firefighters in heavy suits moved through clouds of steam. Someone shouted, "We've got one alive!" Hands grabbed him, lifted him onto a stretcher. Voices blurred. For a second, before everything went white, he saw it through the smoke. Dr. Collier's white coat lying in the water near the exit. Empty. Then nothing. Days later, the headlines hit every paper in the city. Fire at Rikers exposes hidden wing. Dozens missing. Internal unit under investigation. Whistleblower officer linked to leaked files. The articles described a catastrophic systems failure, a malfunctioning experimental block, and a potential cover-up of inmate records. Reporters demanded access. Families of missing inmates called the city for answers. But the Department of Correction gave the same response. The records were lost in the fire. Only one photo surfaced from the chaos, a blurry image captured by a firefighter's body camera. It showed a flooded hallway littered with metal shelves, smoke curling over stacks of half-burned tapes. On one wall, scrawled in black soot, were 3 words, "Stop asking questions." No one could explain who wrote it. 2 weeks later, an anonymous email arrived in the inbox of a New York Times reporter. No subject line, no message body, just an attachment. A single video file, time-stamped the night of the fire. The footage began with static, then came into focus. Officer Marisol Reyes, sitting in her office, speaking directly to the camera. Her voice was calm but urgent. "This is Officer Marisol Reyes, Rikers Island, Internal Unit," she said. "If you're seeing this, something has gone very wrong, and it's not an accident. People are disappearing. Records are being erased. I don't know if I'll get off this island, but someone has to know the truth." The video cut out after 28 seconds. Investigators traced the metadata and found it came from a corrupted phone card recovered from the ashes near the administration building. No trace of Reyes herself was ever found. Another week passed before a Coast Guard unit patrolling near the Bronx shoreline discovered a plastic evidence bag washed up on the rocks. Inside was a single cassette tape, melted around the edges, still labeled in smudged ink, Coleman, Tyrone, Stacks. When they played it, The voice on the tape repeated one sentence again and again, distorted but clear enough to understand. I didn't see anything. But halfway through the loop, for just 2 seconds, another voice bled through. Different. Softer. It said, "They can't burn everything." Audio experts couldn't explain the anomaly. The report noted it as cross-track interference. But to those who'd been following the case, it sounded like a message. By the end of the month, the mayor announced Rikers Island would be fully decommissioned within 3 years. Reform groups celebrated. But those who had worked there the longest, the ones who had heard the hum in the walls and the whispers through the vents, knew that wasn't the end. One veteran officer told a reporter off record, "Rikers doesn't close. It just moves." And somewhere, deep in the city system, on a secure server marked Archive 23, new files began to appear. Fresh names, fresh faces, new inmates classified as internal unit transfer. No one could access them. No one could trace them. But the hum was back, now digital, pulsing through circuits instead of pipes. Months later, in a small apartment in the Bronx, a man who had once been known as Marcus Taylor sat by a window overlooking the river. His hands trembled as he lit a cigarette. The scars on his palms from climbing the elevator ladder still burned when it rained. He didn't sleep much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the yellow door. He'd gone quiet after the fire, disappearing into the cracks of the city just as the system had once erased him. But he wasn't alone. Sometimes, when he turned on the old radio he kept by his bed, he'd catch a signal that shouldn't have existed. Static at first, then faint voices whispering in rhythm. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. The same pattern from the cell walls. He'd listen, heart pounding, until the voices faded again into the hum of the static. And every time, he'd think of the faces he'd left behind, the guards who vanished, the inmates who never made it out, the voices that still called from the dark. He didn't know if the world would ever really learn the truth about Rikers Island. But he knew this. As long as those whispers continued, the island wasn't finished. Because some stories don't die. They wait. And somewhere in the dark, behind another locked door, another voice was already whispering the same words that had started it all. Don't let them open it.